So, good evening to everyone, and thank you, Swamiji, for inviting me here to this truly inspiring symposium. It's so nice to be in the company of people who are not sectarian. Such a relief. So, indeed, over the next 2 days, we will be going through this text by Palden Atisha. Atisha was born in 982 in Bangladesh, which at that time was called Bengal. And apparently he was the son of a king, and in due time he left home and became a monk, and eventually became a great scholar. He also went to Sumatra in Indonesia and spent 12 years there studying these Lojong texts. This Lojong, it means mind, it literally means mind training, but it's much more to do with training your attitude or training the heart. It's not an intellectual thing, really. So after coming back from Sumatra, he was told by his particular personal deity, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha, Tara, that he should go to Tibet. But he was, by this time, he was quite elderly. I mean, he was probably around 60. And to go in that time all across the Himalayan mountains into this, what was regarded as a very barbaric country. So he resisted. And meantime, in western Tibet, a king named Yeshe had invited him to come to Tibet, and he said, "No, I'm too old, I can't come." And so then Yeshe, meantime, was attacked by outside forces and taken prisoner and put up for ransom for a certain amount of gold. And so his son, Changchup collected the ransom, and then his father, who was, kidnapped, he said, "Don't give the money for my life. I'm too old anyway, it's not important. Take that gold and offer it to Atisha and tell him that, what the reason we managed to collect this much amount of gold for him." So they did that, and meantime the king was beheaded. And so they went to see Atisha again. They explained to him the sacrifice of the king in order that Atisha would please come to Tibet. So then, of course, what could Atisha do? And so he then went to Tibet, and he stayed there until his death in 1052. So he lived to be about 70. He lived for about 10 years in Tibet, and he had an enormous effect on Tibetan Buddhism, actually. And personally, I do now feel that what kept Tibetan Buddhism on the straight track was the influence of Palden Atisha, Choro Atisha. He really was a very, very important event in the history of Tibetan Buddhism. So we are going to go through this text. He of course, wrote several books and commentaries which are very famous in Tibet, but this is quite short and manageable. The point with this text is that one doesn't have to be a Buddhist. I think it's a very, it just covers the spiritual life. It's not in any way something which anybody here, I think, would not accept, I hope. If you don't accept it, that's fine, just put it aside. So this text came about because 3 of Atisha's main students came to him and said, you know, the Dharma is so vast and so difficult to comprehend it all. What would you say is the essence that what are the most important points that we should not neglect? And so this was Atisha's reply. He talks about the supreme understanding. It means the highest understanding, the highest of everything, the most important of all these different points that he's going to give here. So the first is the supreme understanding. I'm just looking here. Yeah. The supreme understanding is to realize the meaning of selflessness. So he plunges us straight in the deep end here. The Tibetan word is for understanding is kepa. Kepa means like a kind of skillful understanding that is a learning scholastically. And so he says the most important thing to understand is the meaning of selflessness. So the Buddha taught 3 essential points, which he said is like the underpinning of his whole doctrine. The first is that ordinary worldly life based on the idea that happiness is contingent on pleasure and so forth. I have to go through these quickly because we've got a lot to get through. Is basically unsatisfactory, because coming into this world, birth, old age, sickness, death, that faces us all. Not getting what we want and getting what we don't want. This is the experience of all of us. And so however much we get, we always want more, and somehow it just keeps going round and round and round and round. And this makes our ordinary, conceptually worldly mind very unsatisfactory. People suffer. I mean, you look at people happy, 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 but then when you start talking to them, all their problems, all their doubts, all their pain. So the first sign of being is that our ordinary, unenlightened life is very unsatisfactory, full of dis-ease. One of the reasons is that we hold on and we cling to that which we think will give us pleasure, hoping that it will last. And in the depths of our beings know that it is impermanent. Things are changing moment to moment to moment to moment. Sometimes things change for the better, but very often the very thing we hold on to so tightly, when we lose it, again, it causes a lot of pain. And the third sign of being is this one here, selflessness, which in Sanskrit is called Atman. Now, of course, all of you devout Hindus here are brought up on the idea of Atman. And so when one comes across a teaching on no Atman, then people get very confused. But I think it's important to understand that the word Atman just means I. And when the Buddha was saying no I, he was not referring to the Upashanic idea of a kind of cosmic I, or an I which is at one with the absolute. He was talking about just our ordinary idea of I, which he then reduced into what are called the five skandhas, the five elements of aggregates of being, our body, our perceptions, our sensations, our feelings, consciousness, mental formations. He just said, if you look for a permanent, solid, enduring self, you won't find one. This is a very fundamental core. I mean, all religions say we have to dissolve the small I, the small self, in order to be reborn in something beyond that. But nobody is as ego-bashing as the Buddhists. Because from the Buddhist perspective, the whole problem of our suffering is because we identify ourselves with all the things which we are not. And because of this ignorance, this unknowing of our true nature, we miss out. And we suffer. We identify ourselves. We think this is me, our bodies, our mind, our ordinary conceptual mind, our thinking mind. We identify with our gender, with our race, with our nationality, with our families, with our memories, with our beliefs. And we think, this is who I am. But from a Buddhist perspective, this is exactly who we are not. Yes, it is a temporary role which we are playing. And of course, we should try to play that role as well as we can. But understanding it is just a temporary role. If we met ourselves in our past lives, we would not recognize ourselves. If we met ourselves in our future lifetimes, who is that? That's not me. The Buddha said, if we look for ourselves, however much, and a large part of Buddhist meditation is searching for the self. This idea of I, which sits like a kind of spider in the midst of the web. If we really look for it, it's like peeling an onion. You take off layer after layer after layer, but where is it? And so this quality of understanding that the person that we normally identify with is like the waves. They were saying that yesterday. Somebody was saying that, and it's so true. It's like the waves on the surface of the ocean, but it's only a part of the ocean. It's not the whole ocean. I mean, the waves, yes, that's what we see. The waves come, the waves go, but that is not who we really are. Who we really are is something, it's the tragedy. Because who we really are, as all religions are trying to point out to us, it's something so much vaster than that. Our sense of self depends on our dualistic conceptual mind. Me versus others. Everyone else, not me. And so this subject-object dichotomy is the very basis of our ignorance, that we don't recognize our true nature. It's not, when the Buddha said there is no I, he didn't mean we don't exist. I mean, that's absurd. Of course we exist. But we exist as in our true nature. It's something so much incredibly vaster. and more beautiful than we can imagine. And all genuine spiritual paths understand that. I mean, whatever you want to call it, you can call it the God within, the divine, Buddha nature, anything. That's just a name for something which goes beyond name. And again, that, as there has been pointed out, that in the Orthodox Church, God is never named because it's beyond thought. It's beyond concepts. Anything we say about it, it's not that. And so we can't speak about it, really, but we can realize it because it's our true nature. It's not, it sounds like something very far, very distant, like looking when you're on the plains at the Himalayan mountains. But actually it's so close that they say it's like the eye. The eyes, cannot see the eyelashes because they're too close. Our innate, primordial, unborn awareness is like the sky. The sky is up there, vast and blue. It gets covered by clouds. There are also rainbows. There are also lightning and thunder. But there could not be any clouds or rainbows if there was not the sky. The sky is everywhere. The sky is all-pervading. You cannot catch the sky and say, this is my piece of sky. And so in that way, you cannot say when one is in a state of primordial awareness, this is my awareness. It's just awareness. And so it's also called waking up. We're dreaming the dream of ignorance. We need to wake up. It's like when you're sleeping. While we're sleeping, we really believe our dreams. I mean, the body also believes the dreams. But when we wake up, we are in a completely different level of consciousness. And likewise, from an enlightened point of view, our ordinary everyday consciousness is like being asleep. So the whole of the spiritual path is really a process of wakening up. And sometimes we wake up and then we fall back to sleep. But it's important because even though we fall back to sleep, we have that memory that, of the awakened state, even if it only lasts for a finger snap. That's very important that we actually believe that we are divine. Not just because we've read it, or because our gurus told us, or because it's a nice idea, but because we ourselves have actually experienced that that is true. That's like getting a real foothold on the path. Because one has the confidence then, the faith based on our own experience, that this is true. This is the truth. We are not who we think we are. And neither is anyone else. We are all Buddhas in embryo. Not just human beings, animals, insects, beings in realm seen, beings in realm unseen. All beings have the potential to awaken. It might take a long time, or it might be next moment. But we all have that potential because it's our true nature. We're not getting in something from outside. We're just uncovering something which is within us. So therefore, when the texts talk about no self, selflessness. It is actually a very positive. It's not something negative at all. It's saying, don't be deluded by the present embodiment, your present personality. It's like an actor playing a part. And if it's a good actor, he plays the part absolute with conviction. But when he comes off the stage, if he still thinks he's Hamlet, he's got problems. So it's very important that, even though we are playing our part very well, we know it's just a part. And this is why, that breakthrough into that other level of awareness, which is our true awareness, which is the essence of who we are, is very important. Because then we know. We don't just believe because we've been told. We know. Yes, it is true. Now we have to sustain that. Now we have to make it a part of our whole being. So this initial understanding of what it means, selflessness, that we are not this small, little, selfish, worried, fearful, neurotic person that we think we are. Actually, we are infinitely great. All beings are. If only we could see it. If only we had pure perception. This is why compassion arises. Not because just people who are overtly suffering, but because if one gets even a glimpse of our true potential, and then one sees how much people spend so much time trying to make themselves feel okay, and are going about it in all the wrong way, then it is very, very sad. And naturally compassion arises. This is why the greater the wisdom, the greater the seeing, the greater the compassion. They go together. Sorry, I need to know what time we're doing. Oh, look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, great. You say I'm completely mindless. This one line really sums up the whole of the Buddhist path. But we have 20 lines to go through, although we have 2 days to do it in, so it's not desperate. Okay. So the supreme spiritual discipline is to tame one's own mind. Well, that's obvious. I mean, the whole problem. The whole problem is that our minds are so untamed. I mean, anyone who sits down to meditate, right? You all sit down nicely, sitting there all in samadhi. You get the point, right? So therefore, this word spiritual discipline, in Tibetan it's the word sunpa. And so someone else has translated it as nobility. This word sun means something disciplined, fine, pure, noble. It has a very nice sound in Tibetan. So it's also the word for the polite word for a nun who is called a Jetsunma, someone who is pure and disciplined and noble. So he's saying here that the highest nobility or the supreme spiritual discipline is to tame one's own mind. Because that's the crux of the matter. We live in our mind. It's much more important what we think than what we eat. Sorry. It doesn't matter how pure your food. That's not going to get you to supreme bliss. However pure your food, the important thing is how pure is your mind. So it's like if we had a wild horse, if we saw a horse in the wild and we looked at that horse and we said, wow, that's a really good horse. That horse has great potential, but it's wild. I can't train it because it's wild. First, it has to be tamed. So then, how to tame this wild horse? Well, we can beat it into submission. Any of you who have been to India can see these poor donkeys who are very obedient, totally broken, tamed, miserable. And so we can do that with our mind. We can force our mind to become calm. We might even be able to force our mind to become thoughtless. I'm not sure, but maybe we could. I mean, it will end up a very tense, subdued, tight mind, which is likely to break out at any moment. But sometimes people do that with their spiritual discipline. And they end up very frigid and rigid and tight, but disciplined. But the other way, as we all know, to tame the wild horse is to befriend it, to get the horse to trust us and be interested, maybe, in being trained. So we offer sugar. We stroke it. We are kind to the horse. And then the horse begins to settle down and begins gradually to want to cooperate with being trained. And so this is also like the mind. We can beat the mind into submission. We can flagellate ourselves. But flagellation does not end with a happy, contented, peaceful mind. And so the way to deal with the mind is to get the mind relaxed and centered, peaceful, and enthusiastic to be trained. We all know that if we are doing something which we enjoy, we don't need coercion. If we are reading a book which we enjoy reading, or if you're watching some movie which is interesting, nobody has to force you. The mind goes there. And it just stays on the subject which you're concentrating on, the book or the movie or whatever. Because the mind is interested. So therefore, it's very important for us to develop that quality of really being interested in what we're doing, really wanting to do it, enjoying it. Because when we enjoy something, we don't have to force ourselves. as we know. So, therefore, to tame the mind means to get the mind quiet and peaceful and one-pointed. So that when we want to think about this, we can think about this. When we want to think about that, we can think about that. Now that state of mind, which is peaceful and focused and just very present, is a happy mind. And with that quiet, happy mind, we can work. What we are trying to do is to make the mind workable. At the moment, our minds are very obdurate. We want them to focus on this, so they will go there. We want to think up, it will go down. It's very hard for us to actually tame the mind so that it cooperates. So that it's like it's like a piece of hard clay which you have to work to make it soft, so that we can mold it into what we want it to be. And so therefore the first stage is to tame our mind. Then we can use our mind. Our mind becomes serviceable. Because otherwise, if the mind is not tamed, no matter what practices you do, it will always work against us. And it will be very, very difficult to accomplish anything. Once the mind is tamed, then to actually train it is relatively easy. Do you understand? So really this whole, here also with the meditation, you are doing that. You are trying to settle the mind on one point and keep the mind quiet so that the mind can merge with the object of its meditation. You're trying to tame the mind. All the discipline which you go through while you're here in the ashram, it's for taming. Not just taming the body, that's easy. Taming the mind. Giving some discipline and some container for our practice. That's why you get up at a certain time and you do satsang and yoga and so forth. It's all not just for taming the body, but taming the mind. But if you take yoga as an example, yoga is to make the body supple. It's to make the body and the energies of the body workable, serviceable. In the beginning, our joints are stiff, it's very difficult, but gradually, as we keep going, then slowly the muscles relax, the muscles stretch, the muscles are able to do what we want them to do. And we can go into the asanas without, straining ourselves, without any problems. Slowly, day by day, it gets easier. Well, if that is true for the body, it's even more true for the mind. It takes practice. Very, very few people in this world can just sit down and immediately go into a state of deep meditation. They all practice. We all know that for any other skill. If we want to be a musician, how many hours have you been practicing your instruments? Exactly. Thousands and thousands to become a master of your instrument. And so that's just dealing with your fingers. Imagine dealing with your mind. That is the most subtle instrument we have. Of course it's going to take time to tune it properly and to play it properly so that it makes a beautiful melody instead of just harsh noises. Isn't it? So really, really make the most of your time here. Don't get caught up in just habitual patterns. Leave those worldly patterns and start here to develop new, more wholesome patterns. Otherwise, if you just carry on the way you've always do when you're back home, with just little breaks for doing some asanas, but the rest of the time, mind thinking the same way, chattering and gossiping with your friends, what's the point? You've lost a great opportunity. This is a perfect environment in which to really make steps towards taming the mind. And don't waste it, you know. Our habits are so powerful, but mostly we have unskillful habits. Here is a very good place to develop skillful habits. But any habit means that we have to do that over and over and over until it becomes spontaneous. So, please, during this time, really work at developing skillful habits and beginning to drop our unskillful habits. This also is part of taming the mind. If you tame your mind, then really the rest of the practice is in the palm of your hands. Without a tamed mind, forget it. It's like building any building. I mean, when we built our temple, we spent over about a couple of years just digging the foundations and laying all the piping underneath. And, you know, foundations. I mean, when people come to visit the nunnery, we say, oh, look at these beautiful foundations, aren't they gorgeous? And everybody goes, wow. No way. Nobody's interested in pits. But without those foundations, you know who... I mean, now people go in, they look at the beautiful murals, and they admire all the decorations, but all of that rests on those strong foundations. Without good foundations, damp will rise, cracks will appear. In no time, the building will look like a slum. But with good, strong foundations, even in the worst of Indian weather, that temple will stand fast. And so it's very important for us to lay very good foundations for our spiritual life. And not to think, not to be in a hurry. If we lay good foundations, then the rest will come up very easily, very naturally. But otherwise it becomes very ephemeral. It doesn't last. You know, you come here and then you go back home and then you've lost it all again. Then that's because we haven't worked hard enough now to make some solid foundations. So the supreme great quality is altruism. Okay, so the Tibetan says pensem. Pensem means the mind which wishes to benefit others. Now, in Mahayana Buddhism, I mean, basically, okay, there are three motivations for the spiritual life. The first is that we practice because we are hoping it's going to make us feel better. I mean, none of these motivations are bad. I mean, they're all fine, but each one is a little deeper. So the first motivation, which many people do for religion, is because they hope it's going to benefit me, especially in this life. Or if not in this lifetime, next lifetime I can go to heaven. And so always the motivation is that somehow or other we're going to make samsara more comfortable. And most people, when they go to church or to the temple or to the mosque, the basic idea is that it not only makes them feel better now, but they will be rewarded in the future. And so that is what keeps people, being kind, being generous, and so forth. But mostly it's based on the desire that somehow it's going to make us feel better and that we're going to get the reward for that. Then the second motivation is recognizing that actually, even if one goes up into heaven from a Hindu Buddhist point of view, you're going to come down again. And back into the wheel. I mean, heaven is still part of the wheel. It's not beyond the wheel. And so, therefore, we're endlessly gyrating around. And one never knows where one is going to be next time, depending on our actions of body, speech, and mind in this life. Next lifetime is, going to be how it's going to be. And like being in a huge prison. Really, samsara is like a prison. One time I had a dream. And I dreamt that I was in this huge prison, infinite. And in the top floor, it had many floors, many rooms. And in the top floor, in the penthouse suite, there were people partying, laughing, drinking, having a great time. And then on other levels, people working, people laughing, people crying, people fighting, people loving, until the dungeons where people were in the deepest despair and tortured. But I realized that whether one was in the penthouse or the dungeons, it was a prison. And what is more, the fact that the people who were in the penthouse now didn't mean that they were going to stay in the penthouse. They could come down. And everybody was changing their positions. And so I thought, this is terrible. It's so dangerous. We've got to get out. And so I spoke to several of my friends and other people, and I said, look, this is a prison. We've got to escape. And people said, yeah, well, it's a prison, but it's okay. It's not so bad. And then other people said, well, yes, but it's so difficult to get out. How are we going to get out? Let's not even try. But eventually, I found a few friends who said, well, all right, we'll go if you go. So running through this prison, there was this stream. And on the bank was this kind of flat boat. And there were guards, but the guards didn't try to stop us. And so we got in the boat, and then the boat sailed down the stream, and then we were on the outside of the prison. And we started running. And And we were running and running. I was running, and then the others behind me, running. And on my left was this huge building of the prison, and all these endless windows lighted, showing exactly people partying, people crying, people laughing, people working, all the different occupations which we can go through. Each window was a vignette of a different activity. And so I was running, and the prison was endless. And I was so tired, exhausted. And I thought, they're right. This prison is endless. And what's the point? I'm just exhausting myself, not getting anywhere. It's never coming to an end. Really, better just go back into the prison. And so this idea of trying to get out of the prison and escape is the second motivation, that we want to enter into nirvana for ourselves and be liberated from that prison of samsara. So I was on the point of turning round and going back when I thought, but I'm not the only one running. My friends are also running. If I stop and go back, they also will stop and go back. Therefore, for their sake, I have to keep running. And as soon as I stopped thinking about myself escaping and thought of the reason I was really getting out of prison was also to help my friends get out of prison, then the prison came to the end. And the dream went on, but it's not important at this point. So the third motivation is that we are practicing the spiritual path in order that we may help others also to be liberated. Right now, we cannot help many people because we ourselves are ignorant. But if we really were awake, then we could awaken others. And so that aspiration is called the altruistic attitude or bodhicitta. It's the aspiration to attain to awakening for the sake of others. Just as if we were in a huge swamp and we're all drowning in that swamp, and by making lots and lots of efforts, finally I get on dry land. So then what? I turn around and I say to my family, my loved ones, my friends, everybody, okay, folks, well, I got out on dry land by making lots of effort, so if you make lots of effort, you also might get out on dry land. Bye. We wouldn't do that. We would think, now I'm on dry land, I can use that to help pull others out also. Isn't it? So that desire to use one's life for the benefit not only of oneself, but also for the benefit of others is described as the greatest quality, the greatest goodness. The problem sometimes, especially in the West, is that people sometimes get caught up in the spiritual world, especially in meditation, and it becomes very self-centered, even though the the motivation is supposed to be in order to go beyond the self. But in the end, people end up being very introspective and self-concerned. So this is a very important teaching, to remember why we are practicing the spiritual path. It's not just for the sake of ourselves, it is for the sake of others. And the whole Hindu concept of seva is also very important, because it's a direct hitting at our selfish, clinging mind, which is only thinking what is going to benefit me. Here you are in service to all beings. And this is also a way to undercut our self-clinging mind, that self-cherishing mind which only thinks me, me, me. Altruism, the attitude which lives to benefit others, remembering that we all want to be happy. In our hearts, we all want to be happy. I mean, very few people wake up in the morning and think, well, I don't know, today, let's see, what shall I do? How about being depressed, irritable, miserable, and generally feeling pretty suicidal? That sounds like a good day. Most people, if they had a choice, would choose to have a day in which they felt happy, peaceful, patient, kind, and so forth. And so just as we wish for our own well-being, all beings want to be happy. All beings would rather feel okay than not be okay. I mean, some people have funny ideas on where happiness lies, but they want to be happy. So therefore, to spend our day genuinely trying to make others happy, even just by a smile, a kind word. It's very important. As they say, if you want to be miserable, then think about making yourself happy. If you want to be happy, then think about the happiness of others. Because if we are only concerned with my own comfort, my own happiness, my own well-being, we're going to end up really very, very frustrated and unhappy, as well as not having any friends. But if we are genuinely much more concerned with the happiness of others, then we ourselves feel a sense of well-being. So they go together. I mean, one of the healing qualities of this ashram is that people feel themselves surrounded by people who wish them well. I mean, you go to New York or to any big city and you go in the subway and look at those sad faces. And everybody ignoring each other. You know, if nowadays I think if you say hello to anybody and smile, you know, they will back away. So here in the ashram, everybody is so friendly and kind to each other. So this is again very healing. And it's really basically very simple. Just think of others beyond yourself and their happiness. May all beings be well and happy. So dealing with this idea of really living our life to benefit others, this is a very... People ask always, what is the meaning of life? And so many people feel bereft in the midst of society because they have no meaning, beyond getting more and more things. Then what? you know, so that recognition that just getting more and more doesn't solve anything inside ourselves. There's this huge black hole. So really, without thinking about enlightenment, you know, sort of radiating lights, just very basically using our life to bring happiness to others is a very beautiful way to live. So that at the end one can die without regrets. We cannot solve the whole problems of the world. This is samsara. Samsara is naturally unsatisfactory, naturally dukkha. But each one of us can do the best we can with what we are called to do, including our colleagues, our families, our partners, children, parents, the people we share our lives with, the people at work. All of these people want to be happy, don't want to suffer. So if we just remember that every single being we meet in their heart wants happiness, wish them that. May you be well and happy. And not cause harm. Be very careful of our speech. So that we bring benefit to beings and we don't hurt them. Chancho sencho rimbo chima chepa nanji ju wanyamba me bayango ne gondu pe washu chancho sencho rimbo chima chepa nanji ju wanyamba me bayango ne gondu pe washu chancho sencho rimbo chima chepa nanji ju wanyamba me bayango ne gondu pe washu. So indeed, may you all be very, very well and happy. Thank you.